Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. And once again, I want to dedicate this video to displaying many of your images. I've still got so many in my library to show you because they keep coming in, and I don't mind that at all. So as long as they keep coming in, I'll keep showing them. And so without any further ado, let's get into the images. Our first great image is from Antonio Rusic from Croatia. And Antonio says, I'm a 37-year-old and night photography is my passion. I've been watching your channel for 2 years and learnt a lot. Here is my last one from Mount Malira in Croatia. This is a gorgeous image. Looks like a lighthouse with the Milky Way stretching overhead. Looks like a nice dark location. Really beautiful. This is taken with a Sony a7 III with a Sony 20mm lens. The foreground is shot at 30-second shutter speed, ISO 800 at f2.8. Sky images, there are 20 of them, stacked in sequata at 10-second shutter speeds, ISO 3200, shot at f1.8. And he took 2 foreground images. He's blended the 2 foreground images with the 20 sky stacked images, all in Photoshop. And this is the result. I particularly like just the way that that lighthouse, the beam is subtle, but it's there. And there's just a nice amount of lighting on the roof and the building itself. Little bit of light pollution there in the distance on the low level, and I don't mind that either. But the constellation there and the stars in the Roafuki complex and just all the way through that Milky Way galactic core, that's very well done. I'm really enjoying this image. Thanks so much, Antonio. Now we're going all the way to the United Kingdom, and Tony Stevenson has sent through a few images for me to look at. And this first one, this is the Bamburgh Lighthouse in northeast England in the UK. Aurora caught on camera. And he says here he still gets the goosebumps when he looks at this image, as there's no other feeling when you capture this elusive spectacle and see it on the back of the camera. Well, that is so true. I have the same feelings myself, Tony. Now, this is shot with a Nikon D810 with a 20mm f1.8G Nikon lens. It's a 15-second shutter speed, shot at aperture of f2.2 and ISO 3200. Love this image. It's just got so many elements. I love it because it's over the water. So you've got the beach there and you've got the lighthouse in the foreground, but the light from the lighthouse is not overpowering the image. And that's something that I think is sensational. The lighthouse and the little courtyard around the lighthouse also looks spectacular. And here's another aurora. This is the Kielder Reservoir. Again, shot with the Nikon D810, the 20mm f1.8 lens. Same settings, or almost the same settings. 15-second shutter speed, f2.2. This one's shot at ISO 1600. Once again, I just love that shot. And there's really nice foreground detail. I think some of the time when we shoot these amazing subjects like auroras, we forget about what we're putting in the foreground. And I think Tony's done a great job here of including the building and that beautiful stone wall there, and a little bit of the reservoir, which I think adds just that final touch to it. So this is fantastic. And here we have the Ceuta Lighthouse Star Trail. So this is, oh, it's a beautiful image. This has a background of f4.5, ISO 800, and their 2-minute shutter speeds. It doesn't say how many, but that's okay. The foreground is 3 exposure bracketed images. This is shot with the Nikon D500. Again with that Nikon 20mm f1.8G lens. So that's nice. Once again, Tony's composed this beautifully. I love the way that the lighthouse structure is in the bottom, sort of pushed away to the left-hand side of the frame. It gives that star trail image and the sky plenty of room to breathe, and I really like that about it. And just for a bit of fun, this is something that Tony sent through to me. He says this was inspired by my lantern image with the bokeh starry night sky in the background. And it looks like some little Star Wars characters or something or other there. This is shot at f3.5, ISO 1250 at 13-second shutter speed with the Nikon D810, again with that 20mm f1.8 lens. So there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of fun whilst you're out there under the stars. And I think this looks pretty good, don't you? And now we travel all the way to the United States and Frank Oley. Frank lives in Virginia, USA, about 80 kilometres from Washington, D.C. So it's difficult to escape the light pollution in this area. However, there are a few good dark sky locations to my west, and he visits them from time to time when the weather and life allows. So our first image is a tractor. Frank is shooting with a Canon 5D Mark IV with a 20mm Sigma f1.4 art lens. He's doing all of his editing in Lightroom and Photoshop, and the sky is stacked for noise in Sequator. So this old tractor is an old combine in tow. It was taken in the town of Flint Hill in Virginia. The sky is a stack of 8 shots at f2, 10-second exposures at ISO 1600. The foreground is 8 shots at f6.3, 13-second exposures at ISO 640. So the light painting there is done on the foreground, looks really, really nice. Milky Way galactic core behind. So the second image of this truck is an old Chevy truck. It's an orchard in the town of Markham in Virginia. Sky is 6 shots at f2.2, 10-second shutter speeds at ISO 1600. The foreground is 8 shots at f11, 10-second shutter speed at ISO 400. As the truck was so much more reflective than the tractor, it was a much smaller aperture and a lower ISO. Valuable lesson learned. Yeah, I think that's a good lesson, Frank, because sometimes we just stick to the same old settings for everything. And you know, what Frank's mentioned about the reflective surface makes a big difference when it comes to doing our light painting in our foregrounds. So the light painting on both images from either side. So yes, he took my advice to never light from the same direction as the camera. Good on you, Frank. And again, thanks so much. None of this would be possible if it weren't for your channel. Well, I really appreciate your support, Frank, and thank you for sending these images in. And now we travel to Canada, and this is from Rob Bertrand. And Rob says, here in Harrowsmith, Ontario, Canada, we have many lakes, so much of my shooting has been on the water. Light pollution in this area can range from about a Bortle 3 to Bortle 2 as you travel 30 minutes north. So that's a pretty dark location. So this first image is a little island on Mellon Lake, which just happens to be adjacent to a dark skies observation area. So that's a good place to be. To get to the island, I had to paddle out 1.5 kilometers with my kayak. But half of the route was through a narrow creek with lots of disgruntled beavers slapping their tails along the way. Man, oh man. So that was a bit of an adventure just to get there. So the little island was just big enough to set up a tripod and an LED panel. The large boulder deposited from the glaciers is, of course, what caught my attention for the shoot. The water turned to glass. It was very clear skies and dark, and the reflection was breathtaking. In no time flat, the night went by and the air cooled off with a layer of fog unexpectedly settling in over the water. So, despite having a headlamp, the journey back was rather intense. So I can only imagine, boy oh boy. The specs of this image, it's a foreground panorama of 5 single vertical shots at ISO 2000. The background is a panorama of 5 verticals, 5 tracked and stacked images for each panel. These were at ISO 800, f4.5, 2 minutes shutter speed. And the gear that was used was a Nikon D5300 Astro modded camera, a Rokinon 14mm f2.8 lens, an Ioptron Sky Tracker, and a Voltrex LED light panel on its lower setting at 3000 Kelvin. Fantastic, absolutely amazing. Now this second adventure is at Otter Lake, just down the road. Again, this was another kayak adventure, but the island was a little larger and there were friendly loons along the journey. I don't even know what a loon is, but traveling in a kayak has its limitation for gear, and of course you have to pack very smartly and not forget anything. Oh man, he paddled out only to realize I had not put the memory card back in the camera. Fortunately, I had the D850 in the SUV with the cards and thus made the paddle back, where I then forgot my reading glasses. Oh boy, what an adventure this is. It was a bit of a shaky start. He'd replaced the Rokinon with a Tamron 15 to 30 f2.8 lens. Fortunately, the infinity marking was spot on. So for this round, I opted to use the flashlight and hand paint the rocks and grass, which I prefer as I find you get more texture that way. There was a little bit more wind and sadly no starry reflections, but that's okay. It just means another journey is required. So for this one, the foreground is a panorama of 2 horizontal frames, 5 for each frame, light painted at different angles and then blended together using my technique. ISO of 2000, f3.5, 15 millimeters. The background is a panorama of 5 vertical images, 5 tracked and stacked images for each panel. ISO 800, f3.5, 2-minute exposure. This was with the same camera, but with the Tamron 15 to 30 f2.8 lens at 15 millimeters with the Ioptron Sky Tracker. So he apologizes for the long-winded story, but I'll tell you what, that is so important to the experience. And I'll tell you what, that's one, Rob, that you're never going to forget. But it sounds like Rob gets out there a fair bit on the kayak. So fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing these images, Rob. And for our next images, we go all the way back to Australia. In fact, this is from Oakley Chapman, and he's 18 years old, lives in southwest of Western Australia, and he's recently been practicing his Milky Way photography. And here we have 2 images. This image was captured at Borenup Beach during a camping trip that he had, and there was a slight aurora air glow. He wasn't quite sure which. It's a 16 panel mosaic with a single 30-second exposures untracked. He's using a Nikon 16 to 35 f4 lens at 16 millimeters with his Nikon D750. So that's very nice. Love that tree in the foreground. Beautiful. The second picture was captured with the same settings, but it's a 6-panel mosaic. It was taken from the same beach on the same night. The foreground was slightly light painted with my phone. This is his first try at these panoramic mosaics, and he gained some knowledge from my videos. Well, that's good to hear. He's also recently bought the Skywatcher Star Adventurer Star Tracker, so he's now going to attempt doing some tracked images, and he has a few spots in mind. Well, thank you so much for sending these through. I really enjoy the fact that people of all ages are getting out to enjoy the night sky and landscape. And what better place to be in a very beautiful dark sky location on this beach. Well done, Oakley. Thank you. And still in Australia, we go to the Australian Capital Territory, Canberra, and a very accomplished photographer, Peter Reichstein. And Peter uses the Nikon D750, and this first image is an absolutely beautiful shot with the Nikon 20mm f1.8 lens. So this is actually a combination of the 20mm lens and a Sigma Art 35mm lens. So he's used the background sky is 12 by 2 row panorama stacked in Sequator to create the single image. The sky replacement in Photoshop and edited in Lightroom and Star Exterminator. And the sky is shot on location. The foreground is with the 20mm lens. What a gorgeous image. And the light painting on this one, Peter, is spectacular. I love the way Peter's put a light inside the building, that nice orange glow, which I love so much. Really beautiful. Okay, so our next image from Peter is this beautiful old church. And this is taken with the Nikon D750 and the Sigma Art 35mm lens. 9 light painted foreground images, 12 background images stacked in Sequator, again edited in Lightroom, Photoshop and the Star Exterminator plugin. So, wow, this is just so good. And Peter's done a really good job of lighting this church, because those sort of buildings are quite difficult at times because they have highlights and the white areas tend to blow out a little bit. But I think, Pete, you've done a great job of this one. He's listed this one as a composite image. So obviously he's made the sky line up with the foreground. And once again, this is a focal length blend. So this is shot foreground light painted at 20mm and a Sigma 35mm for the background sky. It's a 2-shot panorama for that sky. And he's done a great job of blending. Looks very, very natural. Great job, Peter. Our next image is, well, that's probably Pete or somebody out there with the light source in the middle there. He's listed this as a composite shot as well. So he's obviously put the sky in from a different spot. Yes, so there it is. He shot the foreground with the Nikon 20mm f1.8, light painted image, f5, ISO 1000, shutter speed of 10 seconds. There was also a single background sky image with the sky replacement in mind. So this is shot at f1.8, ISO 3200 at 10-second shutter speeds. The tracked sky was shot near Bungendore in New South Wales. I'm not too familiar where that is, but nevertheless, it looks fantastic. Love the way that that light is hitting those trees. Now this is a spectacular shot. Really beautiful. Nikon D750, Nikon 20mm f1.8, ISO 3200, 15-second shutter speed at f2 aperture. Just a single shot. Look at that beautiful fireball next to the tree. You can't get anything better than that. It's a simple composition, a little bit of wispy clouds in the sky, just a touch of foreground detail there. This is a spectacular shot. Simple but beautiful. Now Peter's also a very accomplished light painter, as you can see here. This is a single shot on his Nikon D750. It's ISO 6400, 10-second shutter speed at f2 aperture. It's an Eric Pare tube with a torch, and he's got a model out there in the water. She's done a fantastic job, and Pete, you've done a really nice job of silhouetting the model, and she looks fantastic under that beautiful night sky. Gorgeous reflections in the water. You just can't beat light painting, Milky Way and water as a combination. Thanks so much, Pete. And now we find ourselves back in the United Kingdom, and this is from Jeff Moore. And Jeff's been a follower of my channel for quite a long time, and Jeff, I really do appreciate that. This is the National Air Transport Service Radome Tower on top of Titterstone Clee Hill in Shropshire, UK. Boy, that's a mouthful. Now, what he's used here is a Pentax K1, which has the Astro Tracer function with a Samyang 24mm f1.4 lens. He's shot the stars at 60 seconds by 10 frames at f4 ISO 3200, the ground 3 frames at 3-minute shutter speeds at f7.1 at ISO 400. He's stacked using Sequator, edited in Lightroom and blended in Photoshop. The clouds rolled in. He wasn't sure if he'd caught anything at all for the stars, but thankfully, when I got home and had a good look on the computer, there was a little bit of the Milky Way core to be seen. Keep up the great work, and thanks for the knowledge and inspiration. Well, Jeff, thank you for this image. I love it. I love the composition. I love how you've centered the radar dome. I love the clouds. I love the fact that there's a little bit of Milky Way there, but also I don't mind a little touch of that light pollution on the clouds. In all, this is a beautifully composed and executed shot. Thank you, Jeff. And now we find ourselves back in the United States, and this is Tony Souza, and this is taken at Imboden, Arkansas in the US. It looks like a silo or something or other. He hasn't actually said what it is, but I like it. It almost looks like a rocket ship or something ready to take off. It's well lit, and I love the background sky there. That is beautiful. Now this is shot with a Nikon Z6 with an f1.8 lens at 20mm focal length, 15-second shutter speed at ISO 1250. This is a single shot. So he hasn't mentioned how this was lit, but it's definitely lit mainly, I would say, from the right-hand side. That appears to be where most of the light is coming from. There may be a little touch from the left hand as well, but overall, the composition is good, and I like the way that it's been centered. The main tower is directly in the center, and when you zoom in on this image, there is actually quite a lot of detail. So for a single exposure, this is excellent. So, you know, sometimes we spend all our time going through the technical details of tracking and stacking, and you can get some really beautiful images like this as a single, just as Tony has shown us here. And so we travel to the other side of the planet once again, to Hungary in Budapest. And this image is from Benedek Molnar. So thank you so much for sending this one through. He took this photo last summer in July from a tower in the Pilis Mountains. You can see the lights of Budapest, which is the capital of Hungary, from a distant tower, and of course the summer Milky Way over the city. So this is a stacked and blended images. Stacked in Sequator, blended and edited in Photoshop. The sky is 60 by 25-second shutter speed, ISO 2000 f2.8, 18mm lens. Now he used a Skywatcher Star Adventurer to track those images. The foreground is 30 seconds at ISO 800 at f4, also at 18mm. Now the equipment is a Fuji X-T1 stock camera, Fuji X-T1, and a Fuji 18 to 55 f2.8 to f4 zoom lens. So this is really nice. Now, with all of those lights of the city there, it's just a really nice blend, because what he's done is he's been able to capture the detail in the Milky Way, but he hasn't tried to push that right down into the horizon there, because that would be totally unnatural. What he's done is left it the way that it looks when you're looking at this with the naked eye. And I actually like the lights of the city. And there's a few hills and shape there in the foreground, which is beautiful. But the sky itself, and this is, remember, a stock camera. This is not astro modified. So I think the detail that has been captured here is exquisite. So thanks, Benedict. I really appreciate your support and sending the image through. And our final image comes to us from Mariano Suarez. And this is from Chascomús in Argentina. So that's another Southern Hemisphere place, but we don't see too many images from there. And he says here, I was trying to apply your techniques. I need more practice, so I'm waiting for the next new moon. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. It looks like this picture comes from 10 stacked photos for the background using Sequata and 4 light painted images for the foreground. So the background is shot with a Sigma 10mm lens at f3.5, ISO 6400, 13-second shutter speed. And the foreground is the same lens, Sigma 10mm at f8, ISO 640, 13-second shutter speed. And Mariano hasn't actually told us what camera he's using, so I'm guessing a little bit there, but it's a crop sensor camera of some sort, I would suggest. Now, I love the leading lines of this. It's a bridge, it's a walkway, and it is taking us directly into where that Milky Way galactic core is setting down over the top. I also don't mind that little bit of light pollution that's in the sky, because it's there. So, as I've said many times in the past, we just embrace it for what it is. And it actually gives us just that slight silhouette of the foreground that leads us into it. So, you know, it's not overpowering, and because of that, I really like it. So, Mariano, thank you. He says, I love your channel and I love your image. Mariano, thank you very much for sending it in. So there you have it, some more great images. And as I say week after week here, I'm absolutely blown away by the quality of images that you guys are shooting and sending through to me. So keep them coming. I want to see more. I want to see what you're up to. I want to build the community. I want to encourage every single person who watches these videos just to get out there under the night sky and landscape and take some images. Enjoy the absolutely awesome experience of simply being out there. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Have a fantastic week.